when I finally left there, the first thing that occurred to me is, wow, I woke up this morning a married woman and now I'm a widow. But the next thing that occurred to me is, wow, I don't feel very bad right now. I feel relief that now I don't have all these restrictions on my time. I don't have the responsibility of being the spouse of a person with terminal cancer. And I just kind of looked around as I was driving and I thought, this should be the cloudiest day of my life. Why is there sunlight peeking through already?
Join me, 'cause I'm seeking sunshine, I'm seeking sunshine, I'm seeking sunshine, oh, oh, oh. I'm seeking sunshine, I'm seeking sunshine, I'm seeking sunshine, I'm seeking sunshine.
Welcome to the Seeking Sunshine podcast, where we're going to learn how to find the happy when life gets stormy. I'm Karaleigh Garrison, your host and guide on this incredible journey of self-discovery and empowerment. In a world that often seems clouded with negativity, this show is here to flip the script on how we perceive the world around us and everything life throws our way. We're on a mission to banish those negative mindsets and uncover the beauty that surrounds us. It's all about realizing that when you change your perspective, you reclaim your power. There is always something to be grateful for, but it starts by changing the way you look at it. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Seeking Sunshine podcast. I am so happy that you are here. It means the world to me that you come and listen to my show. Today we have an incredible guest, but before I read her bio and tell you what an amazing show we have today, I wanted to remind you that the show relaunches next week. Guys, this is huge. This is so big. I'm so excited. We are going from Seeking Sunshine, talking about finding the positivity in the trials of life, to talking about doing what lights you up, and specifically talking to passionate, creative moms who are trying to do what they love in this busy stage of motherhood. And I'm just so lit up about this topic. I wanted to remind you that you can go to the link in the show notes to sign up for a snippet of sunshine, which is a daily quote that has to do with everything sunshine and beauty and inspiration. And it's just a really cute daily quote in your email inbox every day. Apologies if you hear my son stomping around. It is fall break, and if you have kiddos like I do at home, sometimes we just get to do things messy from home, and that's exactly what I'm going to be talking about once we officially switch over to this new sort of, it's like a new way of talking about sunshine and doing what lights you up. It's sort of a pivot, sort of a new way to describe Seeking Sunshine, right? Anyway, so our guest today, Vicki Paris Goodman, is so amazing. I'm so excited about this episode. She went through this whole thing where her husband got cancer and they had just retired, and it sounds like this really sad, horrible thing, and she was expecting to, be dealing with grief and this horrible thing, and instead she left his deathbed and was overcome with optimism and joy and sunshine. You have to hear this episode. It's going to brighten your whole day. I swear to you. I know that it might come off as cancer and death. And I'm telling you, she is such a ray of sunshine. There is so much hope and goodness, that like death and grief, it doesn't have to be this sad, horrible experience. And she went through this awful thing and was overcome with this spirit of peace and this spirit of joy. And not because she didn't adore her husband, but because she loved him so, so much. You just have to hear it. You have to hear her story and hear about her book. She wrote this book called To Sam with Love, a surviving spouse's story of inspired grief. This is such a beautiful episode. I promise you it is worth listening to. So let me read you her bio. So Vicki Paris Goodman is the author of the book I just mentioned, which, by the way, you've got to go get on Amazon. To Sam with Love, a surviving spouse's story of inspired grief. After the love of her life, her husband Sam died of cancer in 2019. Instead of despair, she was flooded with optimism. She knew the story could help others, and she wrote this book with that goal. She's a retired mechanical engineer, a semi-professional violinist, and a singer. She served a Long Beach, California area newspaper as a theater critic for over 20 years. And then, guys, after her husband died, she went on to lead this incredible life and like auditioned for theater shows and like went on to do these amazing, incredible things. Like, it was like her life did not end with her husband's death. She like blossomed. You have to hear this story. It's gonna lighten up your whole day. I'm so excited for you to hear this episode. This is Vicki Paris Goodman.
Okay, well, I want to thank Karaleigh. Thank you, Karaleigh, for having me, because I'm very interested in telling people about my new book that I wrote after my husband died in 2019. He was the love of my life, and I didn't experience grieving for him the way I expected to. It was actually much better for many reasons. After I gained some perspective on that, after a couple of years, I thought I really should write about this. It could help other people. So this is the book. It's called To Sam with Love, a surviving spouse's story of inspired grief. And you can see there's a man and a dog, a greyhound actually, walking away into the sunset. Our dog Sid, who was a greyhound, died just before my husband did. It was a horrendous few months.
It's a really beautiful book. Like the cover is gorgeous, and this entire idea of like grief can actually be so beautiful, because what grief really is love. It really is just all about the love that you had for that person and that you continue to have and that will never leave you. And so for this idea that you're talking about of like, it doesn't have to be horrific. It can be beautiful. I love that idea.
It can be inspired. That's the term I chose to use for the book's subtitle. Honestly, my perspective has changed so much. I was raised in a secular family, and I didn't think about God at all. We weren't religious, a Jewish family, but very secular Jewish family. And before Sam died, some years before he died, I had begun to believe in God, but it wasn't a very strong belief, and I still hadn't given it a lot of thought. But I felt such a strong helping hand guiding me after Sam died. I'm not a pessimistic person, but I'm not particularly optimistic either. Yet suddenly, after he died, even the same day he died, I was flooded with optimism. I thought, what is going on here? And after that, it was just months and months of revelations, insights, a stronger belief in God. And I thought, this is so strange, but it's so great too. Not only was I flooded with optimism, but opportunities to do things that I might otherwise not have done started coming my way all the time. And instead of saying, I'm not ready for this, I can't do this right now, as you'd think someone who had just lost their husband might do, I started embracing all these opportunities. I auditioned for a part in a play at our community playhouse. Now, I've been a theater reviewer for over 20 years before we moved to Arizona. So, I was used to writing and I was used to thinking about plays, but I had never acted in one, although my mother had always wanted to. And I'd always thought in the back of my mind, maybe someday I will fulfill mom's desire to be in a play. So what I chose was this staged reading. It wasn't a full production. And I thought that's good because usually those have, the actors have the scripts on stage with them. So they don't have to, they have to learn their lines, but they don't have to memorize all of them. So I thought, oh, this will be good. So I auditioned for this thing. Didn't know all the other people auditioning had requested the script in advance. Didn't know you could do that. So anyway, and I had to pull up these accents too during the audition. There were
so fun.
I know there were two characters from different places in New York and one from Atlanta, Georgia. And I tell kind of a funny story about this in the book about the one from Georgia. So anyway, I channeled my brother-in-law for the Long Island accent. And I kind of channeled my husband's best friend, Richie, for the Queens accent. And then I thought Atlanta, Georgia, and I thought of this lady I met, young woman, years and years ago in Pasadena, California. I'm from California. And she had just moved there like the day before from her hometown of Atlanta, where the previous weekend she'd had her wedding with 300 people in this very fancy affair. She told me all about it. I didn't know her, but she was very friendly and she clearly wanted to tell somebody all about her wedding. So anyway, she picked me in this store. And she said, have you ever been to the Conditory? And I said, the what? She said, the Conditory. And I thought, what is she talking about? And in a way, I was getting a little agitated because I'd lived here for 60 years, or whatever it was. And she had moved here the day before. And I thought she knows of a place I don't know about. So she pointed across the street and I followed, the direction, and I saw the sign and I had to stifle. I wanted to laugh out loud, but I didn't. I said, oh, conditori. And she said, Conditori. And I thought, okay. So I channeled this accent of hers because it was branded on my brain from this experience. Anyway, I got the part in the play. So
that's amazing. Well, and doing plays is so much fun. I studied theater in college and I love it. It's so much fun. There's so much community and there's so much healing in that and putting yourself in that.
Yeah, I agree. It made me feel like I could do something that I'd never done before, that I didn't know I could do. I get picked for it. The other 3 cast members were experienced actors. But instead of saying, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? I said, well, maybe I can do this. Let's see.
Yay.
And the whole time since Sam has died has been like this for me. Just grabbing opportunities, succeeding at virtually all of them. And I'm thinking, someone is helping me along here. I've got to tell this story. So I wrote the book. So I start the book. The first half really is not about what happened after Sam's death. I thought the entire story of that would be more compelling if I told the story of Sam's life first. People could get to know this extraordinary man if I had to pick one word to describe my husband, it would be decency. He was the most decent human being I'd ever met. It's funny because I thought that before my mom ever did. She used to say, God, decent. And I thought, that's the word, yes. So anyway, I told what I knew of his life before we met. And we met pretty late in life. We'd both been married before. And So he was approaching 50 and I was just 40 when we met. And so I told whatever I could think of his life that he had told me about from childhood on. And then I tell about meeting him and, you know, dating him and getting engaged and getting married and our married life together. Then I tell about Sid, because I thought that we need to know about our dog Sid, because he died so close to Sam's death and before Sam. And so I did that. And then I told about moving to Arizona. There's some really interesting stories about our move to Prescott, Arizona, which is where I live now. And then everything comes to a screeching halt and we get Sam's cancer diagnosis soon after moving into our new home in Prescott.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can I ask how old you guys were when that hit?
Let's see, when we moved, it was 2016. So Sam was 70 and I was 61, I guess.
Okay.
When we moved here in 2016. Yeah, and he died, we got the diagnosis within about 6 months of moving here. And then
Wow.
he died in July of 2019.
So what was it like getting that diagnosis? How did that come about? Because I know other people who have gone through that, and there's just so many different ways that can eventually be discovered.
Yeah, well, okay. Sam's cancer turned out to be liver cancer, which was kind of a surprise because from what I've been told, and others have told me differently, but from what we were told by all the doctors at the time, you really don't get liver cancer unless you have cirrhosis or hepatitis or, you know, your liver's compromised. A number of nurses have told me that's not true. We've known all kinds of people with healthy had liver cancer. So I don't know what's true about that. But we got the diagnosis, which they thought was pancreatic cancer because Sam had cancer on his liver and his pancreas. And they thought it must be pancreatic cancer that had spread to the liver, but it was just the opposite, which was actually as terrible a diagnosis as liver cancer is. Pancreatic apparently is worse. It's even less treatable. So what happened was there was, I believe, a blood test that showed some, it's hard for me to remember now, it's been a few years, but it showed something like in his liver numbers that were elevated. And so the doctor said, let's wait a month, redo the test and see if they're still elevated. They were. So then they had to do a CT scan of the area and to diagnose the liver cancer. And what's really kind of horrible about that is that since a CT scan shows these tumors on the liver, well, what I should have said is liver cancer is very treatable, caught early, but it's never caught early.
But they waited a month. They waited a whole month before.
No, that wound up not to matter because nothing. Okay. It was very slow growing at the time.
All right.
So it had probably been there for a few years. Yeah. So I don't believe that they shouldn't have waited the month because that didn't matter. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That was
no worries. That's my. I should tell you. I have a severely autistic 11-year-old who has type 1 diabetic. And so like pancreas things and like just, I know that like sometimes waiting, because we were told, oh, it's just a stomach bug, just give it a few more days as he was like dying in front of our eyes. So I happen to have experiences where it's like waiting that amount of time can be detrimental.
It can.
Sometimes.
It just wasn't in this case.
Good.
The point being that if the people who get lucky with things like liver cancer are those that have a CT scan done of the area for some other medical reason, when the cancer is still in the early stages, then you can take off pieces of the liver because liver regenerates or treat it in some other way that essentially cures the cancer. But that hardly ever happens. What are the chances that you're going to have a CT scan of the area for some other reason at the early stages of your cancer and be lucky enough to discover it at that stage. So
Yeah. Are there any symptoms that might
no,
lead to that?
there are no symptoms. Now, looking back, Sam did have kind of a curious, like, belly. He was a pretty thin man and his belly was kind of out there, but no, he asked the doctors about that, and they just thought old age or whatever. I don't know what they thought, but they didn't suspect any kind of tumors that were, pushing his belly out. So he just had a little bit of a gut on him, which a lot of older men do. So yeah, that was that. So I do tell the story in the book of the diagnosis and the treatment and some crazy things that happened. Like one story I tell in the book. This was crazy. I was trying to get Sam into a clinical trial for the immunotherapy that would be his second line treatment, not the first one, but the second one that he would go to. It's a better treatment. But since he wasn't going to survive this cancer, no chance, they said, they just wanted to extend his life and optimize his quality of life. So, so what was the story I was going to tell about this?
That's really frustrating that they're like, oh, well, since he's definitely not going to live, like, we're not even going to give him any hope of that. Like, let's not do this amazing treatment. That's a pity.
There wasn't one. It was just a better treatment to extend his life a little longer. So anyway, I was trying to get him into clinical trial. His cancer had already spread when it was diagnosed. For some reason, this particular immunotherapy, the trials for it were not accepting anyone whose cancer had spread. I never did get an answer as to why that was. So anyway, after a few months of this, and he's on the first line treatment and it's working well, to keep the cancer at bay and all that. One night I was so agitated because I had been unsuccessful at getting Sam into these clinical trials. And so I got up very quietly so as not to disturb Sam. And I went into the den with my tablet and I'm just pounding into a search engine. When will nivolumab, which was the immunotherapy, when will nivolumab be approved for liver cancer, hepatocellular carcinoma? And I just was blowing off steam basically. But this post comes up, this result comes up that was 8 or 10 hours old. Nivolumab approved for liver cancer that day.
Oh my goodness.
What were the chances of that? Throughout the book, I almost named the book, What Were the Chances? Instead of To Sam with Love, because throughout the book, I'm talking about what were the chances of that happening? So this is one of them. And so, I thought, wow, I don't even need to get him into a clinical trial. It's okay that he didn't get into a clinical trial, because if I'm reading this correctly, he will be able to get the nivolumab when he's ready for it, after the first line treatment starts failing. So anyway, and he did. He got it, but there were complications due to it, and we didn't get the miracle we were hoping for, but we had been told there would be no miracle in Sam's case. So anyhow.
It's always a miracle, though. I think you're the miracle here.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel like my life after his death is pretty miraculous. There are a lot of things that have happened that are so neat. One of the crazy things I talk about in the book is on the morning Sam died, I'm on my way to the group home where he was on hospice. I had him at home on hospice at first, but there were indications he might start choking on his food. And so I thought it would be better to have him where there were trained caregivers around the clock. And so I moved into a place called the group home, which was run by a male nurse and his wife. Wonderful place. And it was not too far from our home. So I had thought about, I knew his death was near, and I had thought about staying the night there, but I thought, I won't get any sleep if I stay here. Sam hadn't been able to speak for months, because when you die of liver, when you have a compromised liver, Sam actually didn't die directly from the cancer. He died of liver failure. And the ammonia levels in the body start rising and you get very foggy. And so, it had been 2 months since he'd been able to speak, and he was mostly just sleeping in a chair all day long and everything. So I opted not to stay overnight where he was at the group home. I went home, and the next morning I got up really early and got on my way there, and they called to tell me they didn't expect him to live more than another half hour, and I was 5 minutes away. So I get on the street that leads to the group home, and suddenly there's this car in front of me going 10 miles per hour, even though the posted speed limit is 30 miles per hour.
Oh, no.
There was no way to get around it because there was a raised median on my left. It was just one lane in each direction, a raised median on my left and kind of a trench on the right. So you couldn't even go into the shoulder to get around this car. So I just had to stay behind it. So, it delayed my arrival a few minutes, and I wound up getting there. They told me less than a minute after Sam died. And so I thought, this was so unusual, these circumstances, and the timing so calamitous, that I thought it was meant to happen this way. Not everyone wants someone around when they die, and I just instinctive, another helping hand here, because where I would have gone is, oh, poor me, is this the rejection of me that Sam didn't want me around when he died, or, whatever it was. I didn't go there. I didn't do that. And
You
so
found sunshine instead.
Yeah, I did. And even after I left the group home that day, and I had lots of support there, even one of the caregivers, a young gal who was about 22 years old, who I'd kind of bonded with, her name was Lily. She even came, even though it was her day off, she came to be with me, and people from the hospice, and people, I had no idea this would happen. I had so much support. But when I finally left there, the first thing that occurred to me is, wow, I woke up this morning a married woman, and now I'm a widow. But the next thing that occurred to me is, wow, I don't feel very bad right now. I feel relief that now I don't have all these restrictions on my time. I don't have the responsibility of being the spouse of a person with terminal cancer. And I just kind of looked around as I was driving, and I thought, this should be the cloudiest day of my life. Why is there sunlight peeking through already?
Yeah.
4.5
And
hours.
it's so interesting how we can look at that and go, you were free. And it feels weird to say that. It feels bad, because I've had that feeling of like something, I should be feeling terrible. Like my son, like I said, I have a severely autistic diabetic 11-year-old. And when he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, he was this 7-year-old who would bounce off the walls nonstop. And then suddenly he was so sick, and we didn't know what was wrong. But he stopped bouncing off the walls for a few days. And it was like such, because he was so sick, right? And it was awful, but it was also like, he's cuddling with me. He never cuddles with me. He's not destroying everything in sight. He's not screaming. He's not like all these things, but it was so weirdly like freedom. So I get that feeling where it like feels like you shouldn't be able to say that. It feels like a guilty thing to say that it's freedom, but it really is freedom, and that's okay to feel that. Like, we tend to just bottle up our emotions and be like, no, that's not a socially acceptable thing to feel right now, but it's actually okay. It's okay to find the beauty in the pain.
That's I really ought to just read the preface to the book on this podcast.
You're welcome to.
Well, maybe I will, because it really says almost exactly what you just said here. It says, my charming, gentle, loving husband, Sam, died of cancer in 2019. From the beginning, the diagnosis was terminal. His death came 2 years later. Ours was a good marriage. We loved each other very much. We just begun our retirement after building our dream home in a new locale. We were energized and excited. Then we received Sam's dire prognosis, and the bottom dropped out of our happiness. The news he would soon die and leave me to spend my retirement alone was the biggest shock of my life. How in the world would I cope with this turn of events? The answer to that question reveals my reason for writing this book. Let me begin by saying the stunning truth as I have experienced it. Life after Sam's death has not been terribly sad. There, I said it. Even I was astonished. I'd had no idea how to live beyond Sam, our marriage, our life, but go on I did. And the story is a surprising, even uplifting odyssey of insight, revelation, and optimism. My life since Sam's passing has been, in a word, inspired. I don't know of any book, pamphlet, or video on the subject of grief that will prepare a surviving spouse for anything more elevating than a long slog through months or years of pain, anger, and bewilderment. Furthermore, the materials reliably advise the grief-stricken to expect some of the pain to recur for years to come. But what if it doesn't have to happen that way? What if the sadness and disorientation can instead be short-lived and relatively mild? What if the time grieving can alternatively be spent balancing productive activities and new experiences with the quiet time needed for processing the life-changing event? What if the result is a life just as spectacular as before, maybe even more so? And what if it can begin shortly after the loss? Does the last paragraph seem startling, guilt-inducing, or inappropriate? I think it does, which tells me that in our culture, taboo permeates the subject of death and grieving. Are we free to grieve as we see fit, rather than in a way that is acceptable to society? It's a question worth pondering. In fact, I did not ponder the question. I didn't need to. Instead, I felt a helping hand guiding me almost from the beginning. Opportunities and insights presented themselves, and although I'm not an especially positive person, optimism was suddenly the order of the day. What was happening to me? I wasn't sure, but I decided to go along with it. All I can figure is that I was open to something unexpected, be it spiritual or religious or from the recesses of my soul, and it has stuck by my side for almost 3 years with no end in sight. My life since Sam's death has been so far removed from the accepted grief narrative that I wanted to share my experience in the hope others might benefit. And it goes on just a little longer, but that's the main gist of
I love it.
the preface. Yeah, it was.
I love it so much. Yeah, and it's so funny how it's all about seeking sunshine. Like that's what the podcast is all about, and it's kind of become like my life mantra. And it's so interesting how the darkness was really at the beginning of the diagnosis and not when it was expected to be. And my experiences just kind of go right along with that. Like I was telling you about my severely autistic diabetic son, who when he was 7, which was 4.5 years ago, he was completely nonverbal. He didn't have a single that meant anything. And then he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and almost died. And within a month, he could say all his colors. And now he never shuts up. He talks constantly. And so we have this awful thing, this type 1 diabetes that's, it's still around. We're still constantly battling blood sugars and trying to keep him alive, right? But it brought him his voice. And so I have this really unusual gratitude for this really awful thing. And I see that so much in your story, and it's so beautiful.
And now it's time for a quick break. Elevate your podcast today with a custom theme song. Are you ready to make your podcast truly unforgettable? Let your show's unique personality shine with a tailor-made theme song that sets the perfect tone. I'm Karaleigh Garrison, and I'm passionate about music and podcasts, and I'm here to craft the perfect musical introduction for your content. Why choose me? I'm a talented composer that will work closely with you to understand your podcast vibe and audience, creating a theme song that's exclusively yours. Leave a lasting impression on your listeners with a catchy and memorable tune that perfectly captures your podcast's essence. I understand the importance of deadlines. You'll receive your custom theme song in no time, ready to use in your next episode. With state-of-the-art recording and production, your theme song will sound like it's straight out of a professional studio. A unique theme song can increase listener retention, brand recognition, and overall podcast success. Don't settle for generic music. Make your podcast stand out from the crowd with a custom theme song from me. Contact me today at caroleegarrison.com/custom-songs to discuss your vision and get started on the musical journey to your podcast greatness. And now back to the show.
I talk a lot about gratitude, but boy, I'm thinking about what must have happened when, after a few years of not speaking, your son suddenly spoke.
Yeah. He was 7. He was 7, and I had come to the point where we're really religious, and we would pray constantly, especially with my other 2 kids, and we would pray every night that he would talk. And it got to the point where I was like, I can't pray for this anymore. It's breaking my heart. I had given up that he would ever talk. Like, I thought it was impossible. And I was like, I just have to accept that he's never going to talk. And now he talks constantly, and it's this miraculous thing that came because of such pain. And I see that in your story, like, so strongly. It's so beautiful.
His talking was music to your ears. At the risk of people turning off this podcast right now, I'm going to say something rather shocking, I think, to most people that I came up it's not in the book because I came up with it recently. My publisher was asking me to write blogs for my website, for search engine optimization and all that. And one of the things I came up with recently is death tragic. If someone believes in the afterlife, then your deceased loved one merely gets there before you do. Yeah, maybe they miss some of the experience of life on Earth, but given near-death experiences that you might read about, the afterlife is really beautiful.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, is death even a tragic thing? It certainly no longer seems to me something to fear. And maybe some of these revelations, which are so unlike me, Karaleigh, I mean, I'm telling you, you have no idea how little I believed along these lines until fairly recently. And so, this is all very new to me. Anyway, the fact that maybe death isn't tragic is so eye-opening. And again, I hope people aren't turning off the podcast as soon as they heard me say that. But it seems pretty obvious to me, given where my beliefs have led me in this time since Sam died. In fact, it all started with a book recommended to me by the hospice chaplain. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Proof of Heaven, and it's by a neurosurgeon named Eben Alexander, E-B-E-N, Eben Alexander. And yeah, he was in a coma for 7 days due to and I write about this in the book too, due to a massive brain infection. Now, this was a secular man, no religion anywhere near his belief system. He had poo-pooed all of the near-death experiences of his own patients. And so here he was with this massive brain infection. His doctors, who were also his colleagues, couldn't get it under control. And they told his family, he will die. We can't get this under control, and you don't recover from this. And even if he were to somehow miraculously recover, he will be in a vegetative state for the rest of his life. So you should hope he will die. Okay, so obviously he survived to write the book. He not only did he not die, but he recovered completely. And it occurred to me this whole thing was so divinely inspired, even him getting the infection in the first place, because he talks about how he didn't have the kind of open wound of the kind that's necessary to even contract this infection. So I'm thinking, okay, God gives him the infection, gives him this awesome near-death experience, which matches virtually every other. That's what makes them so believable. They're all pretty much the same. You know, you go to this place, there are levels there, there's these bright lights, there's awesome colors that we can't imagine here on Earth, there's awesome sounds that we can't imagine here on Earth. You feel this love that is so intense that we can't imagine it here on Earth. And you're welcomed by one or more people who were important to you in life. I mean, that's pretty much characteristic of every near-death experience out there. So, you know, he has pretty much the same experience. And he talks about it in the book, and it really took me the rest of the way to believing in all this after I'd started. And it's a great book. So anyway, what I was saying is that the whole thing, his experience, seemed divinely inspired, because not only is he now, you know, a complete believer because he had the experience himself, but there were so many aspects of his particular experience that were inexplicable. Again, like him getting the infection in the first place and then surviving to recover completely. So it's very interesting. And it's even kind of divinely inspired that I would have a hospice chaplain talking to me who would recommend this book, which was the perfect book for me to read to bring my belief system where it needed to be for all this to happen to me.
I love it. I love it, love it, love it. Like I said, I'm very, very religious. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. A lot of people know us as Mormons. And we absolutely believe like we will see our loved ones in the next life. Like we will get to be with them. And it's so foundational to everything, you know, to have, it changes the way that we look at death. It changes the way that we look at life. And like you were saying, like, is death, you know, this horrible traumatic thing? And it's like, it depends on your perspective. It depends on what you believe about it. Do you believe that that's the end and there's nothing left? Or do you believe that it's just a graduation to something more beautiful? And what occurs to me as we're talking about all this is like, I have 3 kids with special needs, and it's like, is, you know, having that kind of mental disability, is that a tragedy, or is there beauty in that can help teach us all different lessons that we really need? Is there something in that I'm missing when I'm really struggling with it? There's so many ways that we can find the sunshine in things that are supposed to be really awful and just the end of the world. And if we change our perspective, and if we can come at these things from a deeper belief system, especially that belief in God and that everything is divinely inspired, like how that can just change our reality from sadness to joy.
Absolutely. It is all divinely inspired. You know, they say God gives you what you need. One of the things I needed was to know that Sam was still there, you know, that he still, not only still there, but with me, that
Yeah.
he still had an awareness of my goings on and even an interest in them. So what happens soon after Sam dies, I go to bed one night. Talk about this in the book. I go to bed one night.
We are all gonna have to read your book, because like I'm like dying to read your book now.
To Sam with love. I know that, you know, I wasn't even going to necessarily promote this book because I didn't know. I wanted it to help other people. And I thought to myself after writing it, gee, is this going to be helpful to 5% of the people who read it, or to 95% of the people who read it? I thought probably closer to 5%, but then people started reading it. And I have not, I'm sure I will at some point because everybody does, but I have not so far gotten one negative comment in terms of, yeah, it's a nice story and it's well written, but, you know, I didn't really relate to it.
Because it has the power.
The comment, yeah.
It's filled with power. it's filled with inspiration. It's like a divinely appointed story that like you were put here and you experienced all that so that you could share this message.
Exactly. I think God meant for me to do this, to write this book, to get it out there. So now I'm trying to do things like podcasts and things, because people say, "Oh, I read the book." Even other authors, have who are pretty critical of other authors, have said, "Oh, I bought your book. I loved it. I sent it to my aunt and my sister because they're not doing well after losing their husbands. And as soon as I read your book, I thought this could help them." And I thought, "Oh, this is so wonderful. This is what I had hoped for." And so anyway, I was going to tell a story about God giving me something I needed, which was, so I went to bed. I think this was in the first week after Sam died, if I recall correctly. So I go to bed one night and it's dark and I'm talking to Sam like I, was doing. I immediately, I just started talking to him and not knowing if he could hear me. And this going to sound absurd to some people. I know it would have sounded absurd to me had I not experienced it. This smoky grayish white thing kind of starts floating around in my view. And I open my eyes and it's still floating around. So I thought, okay, but is it really there? It's probably just a manifestation of my eyes getting accustomed to the dark. The next night it appears again and it's more vivid. Most nights it was so subtle, I couldn't even tell if it was really there, but sometimes it would be pretty vivid. A few months later, it turned to neon yellow green. And I thought, well, based on something I read in Proof of Heaven, there are levels to the afterlife. Maybe Sam's at a new level now and he appears a different color. But I am still getting these visitations almost every night. The neon yellow green thing, it's still neon yellow green after all these years, just kind of floats around for about 30 to 40 seconds and then it's not there anymore. I don't know what to make of it, but I do talk about, one of the most astounding things I talk about is when I asked God to let me know whether the neon yellow green thing is Sam or not. And I told God, I said, and I have a plan how you can do this for me. I know.
Love it. Yes.
Sumptuous, huh? So, and I didn't believe in praying for myself. So I made an exception in this case. It just didn't feel right. So I was always praying for other people. And because I'm new to prayer, I kind of made it up because I didn't know how. And, so I'm praying for other people and for our country and, our republic and its constitution and people I know who are sick and or who have loved ones, all this kind of thing, but almost never for myself. But I said, God, I'm going to make an exception. I'm going to ask you for something. I'm really tired. This is about a year after Sam died. I'm really tired of wondering whether the neon yellow green thing is Sam. So I have a plan. Tonight after I go to bed, if you could just make it more vivid than ever, if it is Sam, and if it's not, give me jet black. So, to convince me of the convincing absence of the phenomenon, so that I know, at least I have some closure. Okay, it's not Sam. So I'm getting ready for bed that night and I'm almost afraid to go to bed because I thought, what if I get jet black? Am I ready to learn that the neon yellow green thing hasn't been Sam all this time? And I thought, oh gosh, what have I done? But anyway, I couldn't stay up forever. I reluctantly got into bed. And usually the neon yellow green thing floats gently around for 30 or 40 seconds. And it doesn't even appear for about 5 minutes or 3 or 4 minutes, let's say, after I turn out the lights. Well, I turn out the light and immediately it appears. It had never done that before. It immediately appears. And instead of floating gently around for 30 or 40 seconds, it goes like, back and forth frantically, like 4 or 5 times, and then off. And I thought, I burst into tears. I thanked God for.
I'm like crying right now, just so you know, like I have like tears.
And I thought, I mean, it convinced me it's that the neon yellow green thing is Sam. You know, I thought I got confirmation to my satisfaction that the identity of the neon yellow green thing is my husband, Sam, his soul. So, because it really was clearly different than it had ever appeared, very vivid, and just he expended all his energy in one explosive blast instead of the usual floating around. It was just unbelievable to me. And
I really am like crying. I'm like wiping away tears.
yeah,
That's
it was also new to me, all of this. But I was open enough. I have to pat myself on the back for being open enough to accept it all.
yeah.
That's the one thing I was somehow able to do, is just open myself to all of this so that it could come and lead me, guide me. Yeah. So
Yeah, yeah, your story is amazing. I love it, and I feel like the sunshine is wrapped up in all of it. Um, just it's it's really incredible, and I'm so happy that you wrote a book about it to tell everyone about it, and I'm so excited to go get it. I have a couple more questions before we wrap up. Just
sure.
what when he first got that diagnosis, which would have been the darkest time, maybe not the obvious dark time, but like where it was actually the most difficult to comprehend, when you looked at the future and you said, why this is going to look so different than we had planned, and it's not fair. Like, how did you get through that moment?
I drove to this Starbucks in town here in Prescott, that I knew had a little used patio out back. I went there in the afternoon, every afternoon for a week, and cried my eyes out. And then after a week of this ritual, I decided it had served its purpose, and I stopped going to the Starbucks, and I also stopped crying. And what became very apparent later on, after Sam died, is that I did probably 90% of my grieving for Sam on that patio right after we got the diagnosis. So there's a big difference between losing someone suddenly and anticipating a death.
Yeah,
Now, I'm
especially
not,
because you said he couldn't speak, he wasn't functional for a good couple months, so he kind of had already been distanced. It's not like you guys were having conversations every day and then one day it stopped.
yeah. And my next blog entry is going to be about that, because I read a quote online from an expert, a psychologist who has dealt with a lot of grief. And she said, and this made so much sense to me, I don't know why I didn't think of it myself, but I'm going to give her credit for it. She says, you do distance yourself when you anticipate the loss of someone. You do distance yourself from them prior. And that quote really helped me, because I felt some guilt about that till very recently. I thought, why did Sam and I not have, even before he stopped talking, even before the ammonia levels started rising in his system from the liver failure, why did our relationship seem distant even then, while we were going through all of his cancer treatment and all that? There wasn't a huge distance, but it was pretty perceptible to me. And she explained it. She said that you do distance yourself in preparation for losing the person, and it's perfectly natural. So
Yeah, and I love that you you accepted that emotion when it came, that you just let it be, and you let yourself be in that grief when that diagnosis came up, instead of like, did a lot of us deny it and we shove it aside. We're like, no, it's not time for that yet. I'm not, not yet, or something. It's like, I don't want to feel that, so I'm just going to shove it aside and not let myself be in that place. And you literally drove out of your way to take the time to be in that grief. And that's so important. And we don't do that enough.
Well, I might have done that at home if Sam hadn't been here, but for some reason I felt the need to not upset him. I just kind of needed to get through a certain
Yeah.
amount of my own before dealing with everything that was to come, I guess.
Which
Yeah,
is it's important. Like that's an important example to people, of like take the time that you need for yourself to process your emotions. Because so often we just get sucked into the no, I'm doing this for other people and other people and other people, and we let our own emotions just get shoved deeper and deeper down until they kind of explode one day, right? But we have to take that time. We have to take the time for ourselves to process the things that are going on.
absolutely. And, maybe it was easier for me than it would be for most people because I just naturally am someone who doesn't stuff my feelings. If somebody crosses me, I also don't hold grudges. If someone crosses me, I let them know what they did. And then I am over it. It's amazing how just letting them know that I wasn't happy with that gets me past it immediately.
That's awesome. And we all should be doing that. Like that is so, so good. It's amazing. It's amazing how important that is and how most of us just don't do that enough. We don't. I'm a self-care coach. And so like that's one of the things that I focus on a lot is like, how do we start putting our own emotions in the proper position, like priority wise, so that we can be better humans for the rest of the people around us. Because when we don't prioritize that processing time, it negatively affects our bodies, our minds, and then as a result, the way we treat everyone else.
Yeah, I agree. So I do feel fortunate in that respect. And boy, it's really been a joy for me to talk to you. The fact that you're inspiring. You have 3 special needs children.
Thanks.
I can't imagine. And you're a life coach on top of it. I wonder why people how
Oh, it's
like you find,
it's been a wild ride. That's why I started this. My husband's also been disabled for the last decade, so we've been through so much with him, and it's a journey. It really is. And when you can take everything you've been through, the grief and the trauma and trials, and you can find a way to shift your mindset on that and not let it just drag you under, and you can find a way to find beauty in it, like that's what's really helpful to people. And so that's why I love talking to people like you who like you did that. You took this really difficult situation and turned it into something incredibly beautiful for so many people.
yeah, I think Sam would be he probably is so pleased that, this book resulted out of his death. It feels like it's a way to make his life and his death a little bit more meaningful still. That now we can help people what
Absolutely.
happened.
Absolutely. This has been so beautiful. Thank you so much for
Well,
coming on today. And as a final question, do you have any final like ending words of wisdom for us?
um, yeah, I would tell people to open their minds to something different than what the culture and society always teaches us. Um, I don't know how I got open to that. Like I said, there was a helping hand in my case. And so I need to pass on that help by saying, don't assume that things have to be the way you've always been told they have to be. Consider that maybe there's a better way. Um, I think that would be my closing advice.
I love it. There's so much beauty out there. We just have to be open enough to see it. And I feel like the world around us teaches us the opposite, that it's all pain and it's all suffering and it's all sad. But the truth is that there's just so much joy to be had if we will be open enough to receive it.
Mhm.
So anyways, thank you so much. I hope everyone will go get your book. It is called To Sam with Love, right? By Vicki Goodman. Is that your last name?
Vicki Paris Goodman. Yes.
Vicki Paris Goodman. I'm so glad I got it right. I know. Usually I have your name like written on the screen, and with my technical troubles today, it's not showing up. So I was like, I hope I remember it. To Sam with Love by Vicki Paris Goodman. And where is it available?
It's available all the usual places like Amazon and barnesandnoble.com and a number of others, but those are probably there's Powell's books too.
Awesome. And then do you have a website to send us to for
Yeah.
your blog so we can hear all about all the things that you're introducing now into this area?
Yeah, it's VickiParisGoodman.com. So Vicki is Vicki, Paris, like the city in France, Goodman. So it's just run it together, VickiParisGoodman.com. And my blog posts are there and some other little ditties and there's an author page also on Vicki Paris Goodman author page on Facebook as well. So.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. We will all go follow you and buy your book. And this has been such a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me, Karaleigh. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. I hope you have an incredible day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Oh my goodness, I absolutely love Vicki and I love hearing her whole story. It just made my whole day. I loved seeking sunshine and finding the positive in the trials of life, and her story just completely puts such a beautiful end cap on this phase of seeking sunshine, and it's just so beautiful. This is the very last capstone episode of that part of seeking sunshine. And after this, we're going to be talking about motherhood and entrepreneurship and doing what lights you up. But this was such an amazing capstone episode of that iteration of seeking sunshine. And I just felt like it was the most perfect way to end that era. And I hope that you agree with me, and I hope that you found as much beauty in it as I did. And if you know somebody who, is dealing with any of the things that we talked about in this episode, please share it with them. I know that it can brighten their day. You can text it to them. You can share it with them on social media. There's a little thing you can click with 3 dots, and then it'll hit share link. And you can just share the link. And then if you would please be so kind as to subscribe to the show, leave a review, that always helps me. And then we're going to be doing a huge giveaway in honor of this new phase of Seeking Sunshine that's coming up, and I will be posting about that tomorrow. So keep an eye out on my Instagram account, which is at Karaleigh.Garrison. So here are my favorite takeaways from this episode. Number 1, we can have gratitude for the awful things. We can experience sunlight on the cloudiest days. Number 2, is death this horrible traumatic thing? It depends on your perspective. It depends on what you believe about it. It depends on if you believe that it's just a graduation to something more beautiful. Number 3, there's so many ways that we can find sunshine in the things that are supposed to be really awful. If we change our perspective and come at these things from a deeper belief system, especially that belief in God and that everything is divinely inspired, that can just change our reality from sadness to joy. Number 4, take the time you need for yourself to process your emotions. Number 5, we need to start prioritizing our own emotions so that we can be better people for the people around us. When we don't prioritize that processing time, it negatively affects our bodies, our minds, and then as a result, the way we treat everyone else. Number 6, open your mind to something different than the culture and society than culture and society always teach us. Consider that maybe there's a better way. And number 7, there's so much beauty out there. We just have to be open enough to see it. The truth is, there's just so much joy to be had if we will be open enough to receive it. be sure to visit Vicki Paris Goodman's website, which is vickiparisgoodman.com, and make sure you go follow her on Facebook, and you can go buy her book on Amazon, and I put the link in the show notes. And last but not least, make sure that you go check out my website, karaleigh.com. I'm also going to put the link in the show notes so that you can subscribe to A Snippet of Sunshine. And that is it for the day. I will leave you with a song. I hope you have an amazing day.